Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where I'm going to be talking about this lens right here, which is a 300mm f2.8 lens, and that is my go-to for wildlife photography. If you've been following my channel for a while, then you'll see that most of my pictures are taken with this lens right here. Now this is actually the Canon version of it, but most of this video I'm just going to be talking about aperture, focal length, weight of the lens, stuff like that doesn't really matter about the brand. So if you use Sony or Nikon or anything else, and don't worry, this video should still be useful for you. Now, if you're looking to get a new lens and this is maybe on your radar, hopefully I'll be able to help you decide whether or not this is the one for you. And if it's not one you've thought about, then maybe you will after this video. And if not, then it's always useful to rule it out as an option. So yeah, fingers crossed, this is going to be a good video for you and will help you decide your next step in terms of lenses. Let me start by talking about the fact that this here is a prime lens. That means it doesn't zoom in or out. You're always going to be shooting at 300mm unless you've got a crop sensor body or an extender on the lens. Now, I guess the question is, does that limit you? In some rare instances, yes, but let me explain why usually it doesn't, and even in those rare moments where it does, why I would still prefer this lens than anything else for most occasions. The advantage of a prime lens is it is really, really sharp. You're going to get a really good quality image. Obviously my experience is only with the Canon, but I'm almost 100% sure that the other brands like Nikon and Sony will have equally as sharp lenses in their prime lens range. And the great thing about that is even where you might wish you had a bit more reach, 400, 500, 600mm lens to get a bit closer to the wildlife, I can crop in a pretty awesome amount with any pictures I take on this lens. So last winter, for example, I had an awesome time photographing short-eared owls. And check out this photo right here. I bet you'd never guess that this was taken at 300mm, because let me show you what it was uncropped. And this was only on a 25 megapixel camera. So to get that detail when you're cropping in that much is incredible, and it just goes to show the sharpness of this lens. Similarly, if you look at this nuthatch here, this is the uncropped version. But look what happens when I crop in. You still get so much detail. So even if maybe sometimes I wish I had a little bit more reach, I can often just crop in and I still get a really nice sharp image. So now you might be thinking, okay, well, why not just get a 400, 500, 600mm? And cost is a factor, but to be honest, it's not the main one for me. Even if I could afford to get one of those lenses, I probably wouldn't. And here's why. I love to go out just hand holding my camera. I don't like to be limited by the weight and the size of my camera gear. I'll often go out and walk a long distance. So this lens here weighs 2.5 kilograms, which isn't light by all means, but I can easily carry it around. And full transparency, as you can probably tell, I'm not super muscly, but it's absolutely fine hand holding this. If I was to go up to 400mm, that weighs 4 kilograms, plus whatever my camera body weighs. And at that point, it's getting a little bit hard to carry around in long distances and to hand hold as well. With this, I can take really sharp pictures, even with low shutter speeds in low light. Check out these fox photos that I got the other night in London street lights, and take note of the shutter speed. And bear in mind, these were all handheld with this camera lens. Also, you don't always have to crop as much as I did in the images I showed you earlier, especially with mammals. If you get your fieldcraft right, you can often get really close to them. So check out these deer here. This is muntjac and also a roe deer. Now both of them, I managed to fill the frame at 300mm, and these animals are usually pretty skittish. So that was awesome, and it just goes to show that a lot of the times 300mm is enough reach. Now the final reason why I prefer having this lens over something longer is the fact that I can get such an awesome range of shots. Now, I don't like all of my shots to be close-ups. I love to include the environment sometimes. So I went on a trip to photograph the deer a few years ago, and I got some great close-up shots, but I also managed to get a couple of awesome environmental shots. Check out this fallow buck in amongst this birch forest. This is one of my favourite shots I've ever taken. And then this red deer in the forest as well. Both of them I just really love, and I love to include the wider environment. If I had any more reach than that on my lens, I wouldn't have been able to do that at all. So that's the great thing, is sometimes I want to get close and I can. Sometimes I'm not close enough, but I can crop and get a lot of detail. And sometimes I want to get more of the environment in. And this lens right here allows me to do all of that. So now you might ask yourself, well, if you want to get a range of shots where you get the environment, but you also get close up, then why not just get a zoom lens? And zoom lenses are great, and they definitely have their place. But there's one thing that you have to compromise on with them, and that's your aperture. So this can get down to f2.8, which is awesome. That lets in so much light, and that's perfect for me because most of my wildlife photography is done around sunrise and sunset. So yeah, once the sun's gone down, I can still get nice images with this because I can keep my shutter speed high enough with an aperture of f2.8. For instance, this barn owl photo was taken just before sunrise on a pretty grey morning. Whereas if I was to get a zoom lens, say 100 to 400 millimeters, or 150 to 600 millimeter Tamron lens, which is what I used to have, then the minimum aperture I can have at that point is usually around 5.6 or 6.3 at the longest focal length. And that just means like I can't get sharp shots, I can't get my shutter speed high enough when it gets darker. So since upgrading to this lens, I've managed to get way more images in those low light situations. And for me, that's just ideal. That's exactly what I want with the type of wildlife photography that I do. Ultimately, it comes down to what you like to photograph the most. If your priority is photographing songbirds during the middle of the day, then you probably don't care about having an aperture of f2.8. And for you, you'd rather have a zoom lens that gets you to 600 millimeters. And I completely get that, and that makes perfect sense. Similarly, if you're photographing dangerous mammals or a sensitive species that you want to keep your distance from, then again, maybe reach is a priority for you. But for me, someone who likes to photograph all of these things, songbirds, mammals close up, mammals far away, get the environment in as well, this lens is just the most versatile for me because in those occasions where I don't want to get too close, I've shown you how much I can crop. I've shown you, how awesome a shot with the environment can be as well. So this just lets me do everything that I want to, and that's why it's the perfect lens for me. I've even been lucky enough to see orcas recently, and bears in Finland a few years ago, and the 300mm was perfect for both of those situations as well. And also, like I said at the start, I can always add a 2x extender to this, so I get the best of both worlds. I can turn this into a 600mm if I really need that extra reach, which is awesome. But to be honest, I rarely do it because the crop is just so good. I hope this has been a good summary for you, and if you've enjoyed it, please do consider subscribing, giving me a comment or a like on the video as well. Hopefully it's been useful, and I hope I will see you on the channel again soon.